Hey everybody, we're live for a conversation I have been itching to have, really more of a listening because I want to listen to John rather than read something he wrote on sites that I believe are part of the authoritarian regimes that we keep trying. A term of service is authoritarian rule, folks. Build your own blog. But anyway, enough about me. John Jones III. John, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. How you doing, Zennie?
Awesome. I want to talk or have you talk to us about the state of Oakland because you've made a number of tweets and comments that I think people need to know about. But rather than focus on them per se, I want to ask you, first of all, I want to get right to the heart of something that's in the middle of our face. The Chinatown issue, which you and I talked about, but I'm going to work backward because Carol Fife put out an email where she accused the mayor of being white supremacist, as did Nikki Fortunato Bass. Now, for those of you who don't know, we're talking about the Cliff Notes version basically is that there's been an uptick in assaults in Chinatown, even though I have to add that East Oakland leads in shot spotters by about 50% of the shot spotter data comes from East Oakland alone. All right. And there's a gunshot every day in Oakland for the entire every hour of every day, in Oakland, every hour of every day this year, 157% increase over last year. But I digress. But the focus has been only on Chinatown. And because elderly have been attacked, and and that's a thing that makes us all want to basically go to war against the people that are doing that sort of thing, without question. So, but within that, there was a press conference where, and I think without talking about it, since this is the magic of StreamYard, we can show it. And so if I go to Zennie62 on YouTube, I can actually show you what Mayor Schaaf did that really. It really pissed off a lot of people, and I think when you see it, I don't know how you're going to respond to it as a viewer, and I'd love to hear John's take on it. But it didn't have a good taste. Let's put it that way. And so here is, I found the video, and I'm going to put it on freeze here. And then I'm going to, again, through the magic of StreamYard, go to share it with everyone. And there it is in all of its glory. I hit allow, slides over, and there it is. And then I will start the proceeding right here.
To share with you that I expect within the next week to announce a new permanent leader of the Oakland Police Department.
Mayor Schaaf hired Roman Armstrong, 22-year veteran, to be the new Oakland Chief of Police.
I believe that this leader will not only bring a new energy and creativity to addressing the current crime challenges, but also be a national leader in the very work that Councilmember Bass referred to of reimagining public safety, bringing a more holistic and comprehensive approach to not just enforcing against crime, but creating the conditions of safety. And we know that begins with trust. I apologize to you, Councilmember Bass, but I also have to set the record straight. I'm very pleased to hear from both you. I'm very pleased to hear from Councilmember Nikki Bass and Councilmember Rebecca Kaplan that they support these additional resources that the Chinatown community has asked for today. But I have not forgotten that this last summer, they brought a proposal to cut $25 million.
This is what Libby did not need to do.
From the Oakland Police Department as a political statement, not because of operational or financial need. If that proposal had passed, those walking officers would have been gone long ago. So I do not forget that history. I hope you do not either. And we have to pay attention to the financial and policy decisions that this council is making during this time. Now, we are answering your call. We will provide more resources for Chinatown, particularly during this critical moment of the Lunar New Year.
Now, that was Rebecca Kaplan just leaned in to talk to the woman in red.
And that was Carl Chan.
But
I'm going to stop right there. I think
also, Libby made the mistake of not addressing Councilmember Bass as council president.
That all these small businesses depend on to support them, and a moment for us as a community to celebrate the incredible cultural diversity that we are so proud to enjoy in Oakland, California. I apologize, I cannot stay to the end of this press conference. I don't know if you want me to take any questions now. I will have to leave before the end.
Oh, and by the way, that was not Rebecca Kaplan who leaned in to whisper to Councilmember Bass. That was Carl Chan, who's a longtime Oakland business community activist.
If anyone is good, I am Jody.
Okay, so I'll stop it right there. But I think that sets the appropriate, stage. What do you think about that?
It's word that I'm not alone. Seriously. I mean, there's a certain thing here, and I want to, Zennie, if I may, I want to begin what I feel and find to be the most important thing. I want to start by offering my heartfelt prayers and empathy for the people in Chinatown, East Lake, and Little Saigon. We are all members of a united, beloved community, and when any one of us are harmed, we are all harmed. I want to add something else, speaking as a Black male and as a Black person, period. Our descendants, our elders and ancestors endured some of the most inhumane, cruel treatment ever in the history of mankind. And for me, that experience should always serve as a bridge to other marginalized communities. The third thing I want to say is why I was concerned about this, in addition to obviously the human impact, there's always a political impact. And a quick example that Zennie, like for example, a white male, Richard Allen Davis, who had a history, kidnapped a 12-year-old girl, Polly Klaas, kidnapped her, raped her, and killed her. That led to California passing the first 3 strikes law in the nation. However, we know since that time who that policy disproportionately impacted, and that's Black people. So anytime there is an act of violence, and anytime there is a move or effort to politicize it, then as Black people, we have to always be on guard as well. Because typically the resulting decisions does not produce public safety for us. It actually produces more harm and injustice. Once it gets to the mayor, I've been very vocal in my criticism of her tenure during her administration. And this, once again, is sadly another example of her failure, a lack of real, authentic leadership. We need a leader who's going to unify the people, not devolve to finger pointing and politicizing these issues. And it's important to note, as you alluded to, in the Black community specifically, the conversation I've been having with Black residents is the frustration that the violence that has primarily occurred in our community, that's beginning to spill over into other communities, there's silence. I have not seen her a single time address people in our community to share any plans around what's going to make us safe as well. So it's a complex situation, and it's just being compounded by this politicizing, as it were. The purpose of that press conference was to address what was happening there. It was not about past decisions from last summer and throwing council on the bus. We need all branches of our government working together, because on top of all this, we're dealing with a global pandemic, which has greatly exacerbated the socioeconomic factors that existed going back to the crack pandemic. So now is not the time for division. It's the time for unity. And if this pandemic didn't teach us that, then I don't know what else will.
Why is it that you think that I read a study by the Urban Institute that posits a connection you and I have talked about anecdotally, that when people don't have access to money, when they don't have money, they get in jobs or content, whatever, jobs, but they don't have money, gun use goes up, crime goes up. And I don't understand not just why the mayor is not addressing it. But I have to say also, Councilman President Bass, and that's something else. Libby did not address Nikki as council president, which was not a cool thing. But I digress. But also, new Councilmember Carol Fife, they both jumped in. They made a video, which is also on Zennie62, calling the mayor white supremacist. But my point is, no one is. It's like they have time to argue and throw, do sniper fire. But you have people, not just in Oakland, but as you know, but all around the country who are in financial trouble and are headed to the streets. And it's like they're tone deaf to the real problem, or they're afraid to address it or even try to solve it. Am I wrong?
No, you hitting it right on the head. And if I may, I can go a little deeper. Let's start with City Council. City Council needs to do a better job. To be quite frank, they haven't collectively addressing these issues. And especially in light of, for example, when the shelter-in-place order was first enacted last March, I shared my concerns around what I saw, what happened. The rise in police brutality, a rise in gun violence, a rise in mental health issues. Sadly, all these things have come true. And let me remind your viewers, Zennie, that George Floyd was in the state of Minnesota, which was also under the Shelter-in-Place Act. The response I received when I shared my message and my warning was people should just stay in the house. That defies logical understanding of the economic, or let me say the social economic conditions and factors of many people, not just in Oakland, but across the country. What happens next? The protests. The same people who were saying stay in the house are now going out by the thousands protesting. Here is a real situation that a lot of people didn't want to talk about that related to the protests. First, I've heard this for years in East Oakland, Zennie. Why do people always protest when someone's killed by the police? And especially if the person is killed in another whole state. Our babies are being murdered right here in our own backyards, and they're silenced. This isn't just from the government. This is from activists and community-based organizations as well. They also need to be held accountable to this issue. And I'm going to go a little deeper on the protest. Let me be clear. That is our First Amendment right. It's not the act of protesting that I have an issue with. We have to always be mindful of what are the unintended consequences. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. Let's start with the police budget. Those acts of protest generated police presence, which ultimately swole the police overtime budget. We can't conduct activities that's going to lead to more police spending on overtime while at the same time saying we need to take money from the police budget. We have to be more intentional than that. Number 2, and this is facts, and I'm gonna give you the third one as a clear fact. Every time there was a protest in downtown Oakland, the same day or night, there was someone being murdered in East Oakland. Why would that happen? People say, oh, are you blaming the violence on protesters? What I'm saying is people have to understand the subculture, the streets of Oakland. People in the streets learn quickly. If police attention is diverted elsewhere, it became open season. That's exactly what happened. You want a final proof? Let's look at what happened in East Oakland on November 3rd, the election night. 92nd and Holly, the street I grew up on. There was an organized effort to rob the cannabis clubs because the presumption was police attention would be diverted downtown as a result of a protest. It just so happened there was no protest. So police were actually, quote unquote, free to do their jobs. They interrupted that. Tragically, a young man was murdered. And there's video clearly showing that this young man did literally run a police officer over with his vehicle, right? So I think it's important. We have to understand connections, the intersectionality of these issues, not just leading from a place of good intention, because as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Now, I want to offer one last thing that's so key. And to your point, this is across the country. And it's not a coincidence to me, in my opinion and my perspective, as well as my personal experience, that the rise in crime and gun violence dramatically increased after the protest. I am connected to different people on the ground across the country, and there's been growing frustration between community residents and homegrown activists, and then when outside folks descend into a given city. In Chicago, for example, it was documented. The Black folks there ran out the activists because what's been happening is anytime you create a culture of anti-police rhetoric, it has a twofold effect. The first is, and this is no excuse because they need to do better, Police are human beings. I think people forget that sometimes. We seen this in Baltimore after the murder of Freddie Gray. Oh, you don't want us here? Guess what? We're not going to quote unquote do our jobs. And then when gun violence rise, then what happened? The residents who live in these communities under fear have no choice but to say, hey, come back, because the activists are not doing the work of disrupting violence. You can't just label it or simplify it as just violence that occurs by police officers. You have to look at all of it, right? So here's the thing that's so key, and it's really, and you're seeing this now. Keep in mind, January of 2020, we had one homicide. It's a 17-year-old boy that was around the corner from where I used to live. Last month, we had 15 homicides. The growing number of sideshows where people are discharging firearms. Why is that happening? This is the most important thing I want to share, Zennie. People have to understand this. The criminal element is not politicized in their thoughts. No one who lived in the streets said, oh my God, police killed George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Let me start harming the community. No, the reason why is not because they are inherently criminals. It's because police brutality, for example, is just one out of dozens socioeconomic factors they are experiencing. So when a climate is introduced saying, or there's a thinking, a belief system that people want to get rid of the police in Oakland, that is drawing, it's attracting folks from outside of Oakland. These sideshow participants, 90% of them do not live in the city of Oakland. They come from cities like Fremont and San Jose, where the powers that be won't even allow these type of activities to take place. So we have to always be mindful that historically, Oakland has always been seen as the quote unquote dumping ground in the Bay Area, a place where people enter to buy drugs, to buy sex, and do all the stuff that they do. And then we get blamed for that as residents, as well as our beautiful city. So at the end of the day, I always share this. The Black Panthers understood that you can't just focus on the systemic and structural nature of injustice. They understood that you have to organize who they term the lumpen proletariat. That means the brothers and sisters who operate on the fringes of our socioeconomic order. Or let me break it down today's parlance: the thug, the pimp, the dope dealer. If you don't organize these folks, the system and the powers that be would use them in their activities to introduce more draconian policies, including a call for more policing. That clearly has not been happening, because I'm on the ground talking to folks. And I'm gonna tell you, as I wrap up on this point, it's different, the age groups. All the OGs, they come to me and they say, bruh, these people talking about getting rid of the police. Don't they realize there's gonna be 1,000 homicides out here? For some people in the streets, that is a deterrent. For some people, it causes them to pause to think whether or not I want to pull the trigger and kill somebody. And absent of that, you can take the police out of the situation. I always said that's reactive. Who's going to interrupt gun violence? You follow me? Because there is unwritten rules in the streets of Oakland. You must retaliate. You have to, or your own will turn against you. So if I can't get you, I have to get somebody close to you, a parent, a sibling, a child, a best friend. You follow me?
Absolutely.
And here's the other piece of that, right? Because this is, I mean, it's a frightening time. There is a mass proliferation of firearms on our streets. The impact of COVID, shelter in place, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. We have a saying, hurt people. And sometimes these platitudes, they feel empty, right? It feel like something that's meant to console us. But we have to understand how people in the streets think. Because the young people have been telling me this. Not everybody young, but I got a lot of young people I mentor that's in that life. And they tell me this. Oh, what? They're going to get rid of the police? Oh, wow. I'm going to kill and rob everybody out here. Because we have to understand these are folks who are dealing with social economic factors, but they're not being organized or politicized in their thinking. We have to address both ends. It can't just segment one from the other, because it is a symbiotic relationship.
But I mean, here's my other question is, you were talking about the sideshows. How do we get to a point where all of a sudden these sideshows sprang up? Is there a group or some, I know it's business for some people, but how do these work and why are they prevalent all of a sudden?
Great question. So I think it's always important to consider the historical context. Let's start with the fact that California, America at large, is a car culture. I like to remind people NASCAR was started by white drivers who were bootleggers. You have to have proficient driving skills to evade law enforcement. The difference is the system legitimized that, right? They call it NASCAR. They go in a circle for 300 times, right? Burning gas, and we call that a sport. The same is never true when it comes to Black and brown people. So going back in the 80s, I attended my first sideshow in 1986. The violence was different. It was reduced. And this is why. A couple of reasons. It starts with we used to have them at Eastmont Mall in the parking lot. OPD pretty much allowed us to have it, right? They wouldn't disrupt it. Right?
Yep.
Don't let it spill into the residential areas.
Right.
When the 90s occurred, they began to criminalize it. And all they did was displace it. They decentralized it. It went from a central location to now the nature of a sideshow is spontaneous. It can happen anywhere. All it takes is me, Zennie, and two of my buddies driving. I decide to do a donut. They do. And now we live in a world of social media. It goes live. People say, oh, this is where it's at. Yep. I want to add two more things that's so important as it relates to sideshow.
I want to just buttress your point with one statement on that. There's another video, I think even maybe in this video, there's a bunch of kids that saw this on Instagram and they made a video saying, hey, look, it's here. And they were riding to it. And I was like, blow me down. So there you go.
Right. When I was a teenager, we didn't have social media. And I always tell people, I'm thankful for that because woo. You talk about a cancel culture, they be booing me out of here, right? But yes, communication looks different. It's easier to organize these impromptu events. Here's the second thing that is making it problematic. Due to displacement, like the sideshows was predominantly Black residents from Oakland. So we had relationship based on proximity. So we held each other accountable because the police used to always tell us, we'll let you do this, just make sure there's no violence. We want to have somewhere safe to go for recreation. We held each other accountable. Now, due to the displacement disproportionately of Black people, if you pay attention, people don't want to talk about this. I try not to politicize things by race, but there are hardly any Black participants in these sideshows the last several years. I know because I attend several just to see this for myself. So it creates a different paradox in terms of accountability for participants, especially if they're not from Oakland. Right? So how do you hold someone accountable that's doing an impromptu event that you don't have a relationship with? And as you can see, streets are blocked off. I mean, even law enforcement can't do this, right? And here's the third thing that's also key because it relates to displacement and going deeper. It's not just the loss of Black residents. It's really the loss of safe spaces for transition age youth between 18 and 24 to attend. Like I always tell you, when I grew up in East Oakland, Zennie, we had 3 movie theaters. We had a skating ring, a bowling alley. We even had a club in Alameda of all places for teenagers 16 years of age and older. Not only have those,
I was there,
right?
Yep.
Right, the Twilight Zone, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
If you remove those places for this age group to go somewhere safely and recreate, right? And then on top of that, the reality and impact of shelter in place. We call that adult timeout. It's only so long you can tell someone to stay in the house. It's only so long for this age group in particular, who most of them probably already experienced having a loved one killed by the time they reach middle age. So their concept of life and their own mortality looks radically different from you and I as adults with fully developed brains, right? So there's a number of converging forces at play. And I want to say this as what I think to be what could be a viable solution, or at least an alternative to this. Go back to, I know the city can't legalize it for insurance liability purposes, that's fine, but they can treat it as a low priority and curtail it off by the Coliseum in the industrial area. It won't interrupt.
I just a thought. First of all, Derrick Sue's running for mayor, says you're 100% right from Oakland. He's also a vlogger. Got to get you on too. He says Bay Area is about your ride. I used to cruise the boulevard back in the 70s. Police criminalized us for driving slow. So that's Derrick Sue. But when I look at this, this Cadillac, right? You know what I think of? I think of, wow, they could be sponsors. They could draw sponsors who are tire manufacturers, and they could do contests. And the winning tire, right, gets is paired with the winning driver, and they have more contests. And the idea is, hey, what's the best tire? And they're doing tire tests for manufacturers without even knowing it. There's a huge business here that the city could get a chunk of. And if it were someone white that made that proposal, you and I both know, right? They would listen and say, oh, this person has this idea and suddenly it'll be this cool. And, they'd be written up in the white-owned news organizations and all that jazz. And unless, of course, I got a hold of them first just to, basically play games. But it was news, right? But the whole point is, and I'm serious about that, folks, what I just said. And then all of a sudden, it's cool, which is really bothers me. You and I both have grown up with this idea that if it's black, the mainstream society, of which the mainstream media reflects, doesn't want to see it. Even to this day, there's always an asterisk, there's always a thing. And yet, obviously, people are doing it. It reminds me of the heyday of hip hop, and yet they're criminalizing these guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk more than I did, but just wanted to say that because these videos are all over. I mean, in fact, the one I just showed you, the date here is January 1/17 this year.
Yes.
In Oakland, and I think Davey D was pointing out that he said somebody was going around and tagging Oakland, but using sideshow scenes from other cities. But to me, that just communicates that Oakland is the place to be for sideshows.
Yes. In addition to the internet, right? Hip hop has made our world smaller. So the hypey movement, the impact of, because sideshow is an Oakland thing, and then hip hop is a vehicle to share that. So this has been going around the country as well. But I do want to just go a step further when you're talking about criminalization. First, let me shout out Derrick. Derrick Sue is one of the most fierce, compassionate activists I know in the city of Oakland. This is what we need. We need folks like him who get to the heart of the matter and really see the people and the humanity, because that's what's missing from the sideshows. To your point, I want to give an example, Zennie. If my 6-year-old son was drawing pictures on the wall, people call that graffiti. I have two choices. I, as a parent, can first be upset and want to punish him for defacing my wall, or B, I can recognize, hey, my son has a talent here. Let me purchase him some art supplies. Let me enhance that gift of creativity as opposed to criminalizing it and shutting it down. It is not an easy feat to do donuts or figure eights in the streets. That is a real skill. But to your point, it becomes a matter of who is a participant. If it's white, another thing we know, for example, for white guys who are computer hackers, what the government do? They charge them and they say, hey, instead of sending you to prison, we're going to hire you. That way you can teach us to upgrade our security protocols because you're one of the few brightest people in this area. It's always about race, and we have to do a better job, not just as a society, but even as people of color, of making sure we're not drinking that Kool-Aid.
Yep. And not only that, too, you said, talking about the skill, something that's taken, and Derrick Sue said exactly, John, something that's taken, hey, you know what we can do? I don't know. I just realized if you wanted to have, Asian, African-American conversation, I can invite Derrick in. That's up to you,
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Hey, Derrick, I'm going to send you an invite if you're, and here, and I'm going to text it to you so that you'll get it. And while I'm texting it, the point I want to make with, not the point I want to make, but what I want to share in terms of a thought with John is that photograph, that frozen video that you see there of that Cadillac, it might seem normal, but to me it's remarkable because that guy, he didn't hit anybody, in the audience. You talk about skill, that's skill. And no one is concerned that, this guy's going to be out of control, right?
Exactly.
John, that is freaking remarkable. I mean, I just straight out remarkable, and it's shameful to finish our theme here, or my theme within a theme. It's shameful that that people don't see this for what it is. These guys like professional stunt drivers. Hollywood could recruit from this group and they'd have new jobs.
All right, stunt drivers, the Fast and the Furious, Oakland edition.
Absolutely, the Fast and the Furious. Hey, Derrick, I just emailed you the link to your email at Sue Derrick. So check out that link and then come on in and join us because love to have your valuable voice. I can text it to you as well if that helps out. I'm trying to basically make sure that my multitasking skills are on point. And let's see here. They are about 3/4 effective. So let's see here. I'm going to take this, copy it, and then go here and there, and here we go. And I'm going to write link, L-I-N-K, link, and then there, and there it is. So now you have it as a link, Derrick, to your phone via text, and you have it in your email. And so we'll continue. But yeah, this is remarkable, and I will continue this or there. Right? Look at what this guy is doing. I just, and I shut down the sound, but if you want to hear the sound, okay. Fully controlled, okay? Fully controlled.
That's why the post wasn't moving, because that shows you clearly they trust this robber's skills. This robber didn't just show up out of nowhere and do this. There are certain robbers who do this for years. So you say, oh yeah, this guy got what we call on the street handles, the ability to drive.
Yeah, I'm just like, and then Kaidi says, hey y'all, okay, fine, fire your question away. But yeah, and so moving on from this though, you also make a comment about, there are a number of comments you've written on Twitter, and I'm going to go and get those as well. But they allude to use your word, disconnect between what you experience, what we experience, and what government in Oakland seems to think, or doesn't understand. For example, I'm going to Twitter right now. For those of you stuck around just for the fireworks, sorry. But there's John Jones here account. And here that is. Yeah. And so I've got a Twitter account here. And now I'm going to display it. There's his Twitter account. Isn't StreamYard cool? So there are a number of interesting tweets that you can find here. I think that's about let's see, this Warriors. Oh, this was my words and work are not based on the receptiveness of this generation and era, but rather the judgment of future generations. Hindsight is always 20/20. And what were you trying to say here? Was that based on something that happened, or?
It's about pretty much everything that's happening today, Zennie. I've been mindful, doing a lot of reflecting, especially after last summer. And one of my biggest concerns I always share, Zennie, there's a difference between a moment and a movement. A movement is a collection of moments that are sustained by deep relationship building. Moments is when something happens, people immediately react, and then that energy dissipates, right? So for example, when I seen what happened with George Floyd, I was telling folks, we've been here before in my lifetime, going back to Rodney King. Right? And we didn't have social media then. And sometimes there's a tendency that when these events occur, people get riled up, but then people go back to life as quote unquote normal. So for me, the things I've been sharing, I know it takes time for people to understand this because we all have our own perspectives. And I think for me, I have the privilege, as it were, as someone in Oakland that come from the streets of Oakland, right? So I didn't just move to Oakland or went to college, right? Like I've been arrested and all that. So I know this mentality because I'm always seeing folks. The point is I share things not just to be a follower, because I think there's a tendency to create these echo chambers, right? Mm-hmm. I want to be authentic, but most importantly, I do mean that when I say the future will judge us. Just like today in this moment, right? People are removing the monuments to Confederates, right? Yep. Today we're saying that's wrong. In their time period, they didn't see it as such. So I think we have to always start with humility, right? We have to ask ourselves, are we doing the right thing or are we doing the popular thing? And sometimes the two things are in conflict.
I want to bring in Derrick so he's backstage, and then I want to get to your tweet. Hey, Derrick, how are you?
Going well, Zennie. How you doing, John?
Hey, how you doing, my buddy?
I'm doing great.
Hey, before we shift, I want to get to another tweet, John, you put up. You wrote, let me be clear. As a black man, I experienced the response of fear from all races in Oakland, even as someone who has been featured in the media. I choose to exercise emotional intelligence and empathy as unifying tools. I know what you mean, but explain that for the
Sure. And I think it's important to your point to contextualize this. This tweet in particular was a follow-up to a previous tweet that I shared expressing my heartfelt sympathy for the folks in Chinatown, Eastlake, and Little Saigon. And the complexity of these issues, because I've noticed that there's been, when people name that what's been happening, there's some people have been calling that anti-black racist, right? Truth is, black males are harming people. That's just the truth. We have to stop politicizing it, right? I don't like language that invisibilize people. So, but I also wanted folks to understand, because I'm mindful of the complexities, right? So I didn't want to perpetuate this either or dynamic or even limit it. So, and the last thing, you got to remember, this also was a follow-up to, yeah, you see it there. So I shared that there was an Asian guy coming my way on the street, and he crossed the street, right? But I want to make clear that this wasn't about just black or Asian relationships, right? Because I feel like that's when things devolve and break down. I want to make it clear I experienced that from all populations, right? Yeah. But the key is this: I wanted to demonstrate what leadership looks like. We have a choice. Long story short, we can start with our own hurt feelings, or we can stop and reflect on the other person's position.
Hey, John, if I may, my feelings are not hurt. I feel like when a person does that, I own the street. I'm like, yeah, okay. I used to want to find out why, but then I thought, you know what? That's not a person I want to know anyway. That person's a loser. So why do I care? Right? You know, at all. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. Then we'll get to Derrick too.
Yeah, sure. Because I definitely want to hear from Derrick. But I think it's so important, Zennie, that we do care, right? I have a saying: transformation can only occur from close proximity. And a lot of reasons why situations break down is because if we leave from a place of assumption, right? Meaning putting myself first. So in that situation, when I seen this elderly guy coming my way and he seen me and he hurriedly tried to cross the street, mind you, he had a cane. He almost got hit by a car in his desire to cross the street. I've learned, that's why I'm saying emotional intelligence, right? I didn't want to personalize it because, first of all, he doesn't know me. If he knew me, he would know. He would be safe around me. That's why I didn't personalize it. I think the important thing was to understand, but here's someone that's elderly, who's been through a lot. And our country sucks at making sure our elders are honored as national treasures. So I place myself in his shoes. Because to be quite frank and honest, that's the work I do, Zennie, as someone formerly incarcerated. Every time I share that, there's an expectation from me clearly that folks give me some grace to see me beyond a record. So I, in turn, try to model that as well, to really see the person and not just see my response. So that's why I wanted to share that, because if we don't do that, that's where things can get, I'll just give it a word, politicized. That's where things break down. It's not always either or. It's usually both and plus more.
I want to, Derrick is also a 2020, actually 2022 candidate for mayor of Oakland. And he is a Zennie62 media vlogger as well, who's done a lot of valuable work in vlogs. And Derrick, we got to bring John in the fold. Derrick,
absolutely.
Yeah. We think about this problem.
John is a fellow East Oakland resident, and I didn't hear what you said, Zen.
Oh, I'm sorry. What do you think about this problem that we're talking about with what the attack on Asian elderly? You've expressed it. I saw on your social media, and you made actually also a video on it and your personal story. But what do you think about how the city has handled it? The mayor, share with us.
Not sure if the issue's on my end.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Okay, now.
Should I repeat it or?
Yes, please.
Sure. Yeah. What do you think about the problem? I'll say it just like that.
Well, the Chinatown issue has been a long-standing issue, especially this time of the year, for criminals. And it doesn't matter what the skin color is, that's irrelevant, because it happens across the board, because the Asian American seniors are constantly victimized this time of the year because of the little red envelopes that they tend to carry in their pockets. And they hand them out to their favorite business owners friends that they come across in Chinatown. And so this is a lot of extra money that they normally don't carry. And so back in 2008, my father was targeted by two such criminals where they literally took and beat a 75-year-old man unconscious, ripped his pants off in the middle of the public street, and kicked him unconscious. He spent 2 days in the hospital just getting over to make sure that he was stable enough to go home, where my sister at the time was able to take care of him. I wasn't here. I was going through my own traumas back in North Carolina with financial collapse and loss of all my money. But it's been a long-standing issue. It's a very personal issue for me about Chinatown attacks, and especially on seniors, because that's been happening for a very long time, and it just didn't get the press that things like this are getting nowadays because of venues like this and formats like this to get the message out, rather than just the mass media speaking.
How, John, did you have a question for, or Derrick, you have a question for John in terms of thoughts and how we all can work together, or?
Oh, no, I will be giving you a call this week, John, because I have something that I really need to get with you. I'm also in conversations with Carol Fife and several other people. Nikki is also on the list where I'm talking. Zennie's already seen my plan. So, yeah. So he knows what I'm up to. And so I want to include you. You are a major key to this project. So I definitely will be getting with you this week. It's just been crazy here with everything that I'm doing.
Hey, John and Derrick, what do we, how do we address what the mayor did? I have repeated my call for the mayor to apologize, because that's all Libby really, I think that's all anyone wants. But just to take what is really something that should not be the central focus of this entire issue and broom it fast,
Yeah, a simple apology saying that she shouldn't have stated what she stated. I mean, that's old news. Just like a lot of things that we're addressing is old news, but it keeps coming up. Yeah, you just keep opening the old wounds. They never get to heal.
Yeah. John?
Yes, I totally agree. I definitely had one to hear Derrick thoughts of somebody I deeply respect. For me, as I open up, I shared Zennie. My first concern was the people, not the politicians. So I had wanted to create real space for that. And as a follow-up, I've issued a call of my own with my fellow Black brothers and sisters, and people are answering the call. So Derrick, please give me a call. I want to shout out my dear friend, Dr. Jen Tran as well, because she issued a similar call. So we're here. We're one unified, beloved community, and that's how we got to function. But going back to Libby, right? So I want to censor people first. That's my position. Apologize is one thing, right? I think at the end of the day, I mean, she turns out next year. Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing is real, authentic leadership. Leadership that brings people and entities and governmental structures together, not leadership that devolves to finger pointing. We're all being besieged by so many things in our community. And the last thing we really need, I know for me, the last thing I want to hear is that finger point. Because my other concern is what it does, it just perpetuates apathy, right? These are situations where people who are registered to vote, but they're least likely voters, is usually because of things like that. So that's why I try to stay away. Like I try to give clear, if I give a critique, in other words, I try to open the door to where not only can that person, make amends, because we're all human beings, we're all gonna make mistakes, but most importantly, encourage people who live, especially in our marginalized communities, to give them a sense of hope. But if it's spun in a manner to where, that just politicians being politicians, And then this is where these things continue to occur. So for me, I always want to be mindful of the complexity.
You know what I'd like to see is, and I've said this again and again and again and again and again, and I'll say it again and again and again, we need to bring back redevelopment, and not necessarily the way it was done, but allowing the tool of tax increment financing, specifically being able to, for those of you who don't know what that is, basically the dollar that you pay in property taxes goes to BART, AC Transit, the County of Alameda, the City of Oakland, and the Flood Control District. It's split that way. But under redevelopment, an agency office would take that money and then use it to pledge it toward a bond issue, which would then go for a number of, well, you can design the law as you wish. You can have it target city services in an area. You can have it target improved education. You can have it targeted for affordable housing. We used it in its original version since from 1968 to 2010, where such that 20% of the redevelopment money we took in tax increment financing went to affordable housing. Now you would say, okay, Zennie, what is tax increment financing? It works like this. This is your base year of assessed value for a property. The next year is year one. You take year one assessed value, subtract year zero. That's your first year. Second year minus the base year. Third year minus the base year. And those amounts accumulate. And each year you multiply that times the tax rate, which is 1%, and you dump it in the pool, okay? And if you think about it, it's actually a doubling formula that's extremely powerful that can be used to finance everything from, well, Henry Gardner told me that we used to use it in 1983 to remove crack houses in East Oakland to sports stadiums, okay? And yet Jerry Brown was under the, who was my boss, okay, was under the idea, he said, that we would lose, we would save $1 billion when we had that gigantic deficit just prior to his running for governor. But the truth is the California Finance Association pointed out to him that wasn't true, and it turned out not to be true. Then he got on with Joan Walsh and Salon in 1999 late, and then more recently last year, and said that he didn't want redevelopment money spent for affordable housing in his areas where he wanted luxury apartments and luxury eateries to be. He said that. I'm paraphrasing, but he did say that, and I went ape and made a number of videos about it, meaning his intention for getting rid of redevelopment wasn't really about helping to revitalize areas for and making them better for people who needed to have places that were affordable. He wanted luxury. He wanted elegant density, as he called it, and wrecked what was, in the case of Oakland, one of the greatest in terms of funding percentage with respect to need, affordable housing budgets in California history, if not the greatest. When Jerry got rid of redevelopment that year of 2011, our budget for that year alone, for affordable housing alone, was $111 million. I told Libby this when she sent out her first email bragging that they had $50 million for affordable housing. I said, please don't do that, because we had double that when redevelopment was killed, and you're going to do a victory lap for this? That's crazy. Okay. I'm sorry, I get infuriated all over again when I see, and I am just saying this straight out, the gigantic level of civic incompetence. And I'm not talking about Libby. I love Libby as someone who is dear to me, but this is about the matter of being responsible for hundreds of thousands of people, okay, and their livelihoods and the future. And so at that point, it's not a matter of speaking truth to power. It's just a matter of talking about how things work, okay? I've been in government a long time. I can run for mayor and make that stuff turn around. The timing is not right for me, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to explain what we need to do, because we're losing too many people in Oakland who work for Oakland, who have the institutional memory, all right, but they're tired and they're beleaguered. And we started ranked choice voting and then strong mayor. And so what happens, we used to have a stable government with Henry, and it got to a point where every 1.21 years, we were getting rid of CAOs, okay? Starting with Fred Blackwell. Fred saw that Gene Kwan wasn't going to run for re-election. He said, I'm out of here, right? And he bailed, okay? Wake the fuck up, people. All right? You're allowing this. Learn how your government works, who your council members are, okay? And what tax systems work and don't work. This is your fault too. This stuff's ridiculous. Sorry. But I'm just pissed off with it. I'm tired of this incompetence. I really am.
Yeah, I agree with you, Zennie. I've lived through it, and in fact, I lived in one of those stupid luxury buildings that came up and became available in 2002, the Essex. I lived there for 2 years. That place sucked. They were touted as luxury living. Oh, it was. I've seen better organization here in my camp living on the street than what was going on there at the Essex. And I was paying $1,600 a month, where the only reason why I was renting that place because I had just sold my condo and I was using the condo money to restore and rebuild my Santa Clara home. And it was going to take 2 years. And that was the only reason why we spent the money on that place. I hated the place. All I saw was crime around the lake. I mean, there were so many issues in the building and the mismanagement. It was horrible, and they called it luxury living. And now, instead of paying $1,600 a month like I did in 2002 to 2004, now you're going to pay $4,000 or $5,000 for that luxury living, and even smaller space. I had 600 square feet. Now you get 428 for that.
But Derrick, I do have to say, I love you, my friend, but that was luxury living. I want one of those places. Okay. You know, the only reason I didn't get one of those places is because you walk into those, the balcony is so shut. I thought, oh, I can see having a party. Somebody gets drunk. Next thing you know, it's it's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. So all right. I'm just saying.
But you know what's interesting though, because I'm appreciating what both of you sharing. So for me, I have two quick takeaways.
Yeah.
Let's start with when the redevelopment dollars were taken away. We look at what year that started. It's easy to connect the dots when our unstructured population exploded here in Oakland. It's not a coincidence, exactly. Right?
It was exactly that.
Right. And then the second thing is this. To me, there's a lot to be said about the Democratic Party. I think, Zennie, to your other point about people being informed and being engaged, I think especially under the Trump administration, there was a lot of energy trying to get us to hyper focus on his flaws. And to me, that's a shell game. I mean, even now with this impeachment, and I'm gonna be real on this. I'm gonna give you my opinion on why they're trying to impeach Trump. What I take away from that is they really fear, because first of all, he is the #1 candidate for the Republicans in 2024 as of right now, absent of impeachment. I really believe they fear he would be reelected. And what that tells me is if you're fearing his election viability, then maybe you need to have a plan. They spent the last 4 years blaming Trump, and they set an extremely low bar, right? To where who's a Republican here on city council, for example, right? It's not enough to say this guy is horrible. I need to hear from you. What's your values? And even right now, in the next 4 years, I've been sharing with people saying things like, oh, Biden go win. We're going back to normal. What is normal? Normal for who? Because prior to COVID, we wasn't living good out here. So it's a matter of privilege. And I really think all of us, to your point, have to do a better job of holding all our government accountable. And I'll even add ourselves as well. We're no longer in a position just to sit on the sidelines and watch these things happen. And this is a perfect example, utilizing platforms like yours to have real truth that's not predicated on someone else trying to create or control the narrative. Let's talk about what everyday folks in Oakland see when we leave our homes. For those of us who even have the privilege of even having a home, for example, right? So,
yeah, we need to get Derrick elected because, as I think about it, someone who has had the background that Derrick has, actually the best person to be there to want to fix it, because Derrick, the reason why I say that is we have, I'll just say this, all the council members are well paid. And so they're well paid to a point where they don't have to think, well, gee, am I wasting time arguing here when, I need money, right? And yet people out there who need money, who are waiting for government to do something, and they're waiting for this hope. Their hopes are dashed when they hear, Libby and getting her thing, and then they hear, because a lot of people are not on Twitter, okay? They hear that, Council President Bass called the mayor a white supremacist. And then they get a letter from the email from Carol Fife about, the same thing. But what does that have to do with their need to put food on the table, to get decent health care, to know that they're going to have a place to live? And not only that, even if they have a home to live in, all of a sudden, here comes the building inspector to fine them, which we have not put moratoriums on in the middle of a damn pandemic. It's stupid. The stuff that we're doing, we allow cities to do in the middle of this is, I'm not going to curse, it is just freaking stupid, man. And what's worse is that the electorate puts up with it. Folks, I'm going to say this, okay? All of us were born before the internet. We were teenagers before the internet. Those of you who are younger, who were born on the internet, take a time out and just do some basic reading about something, rather than, even if you get online, read it in depth, okay? Understand it to a point where, for example, with economics, if I say, conservative economics, you understand it's ISLM as opposed to something that's racist. Because a lot of people call themselves conservative, have no fucking idea what they're talking about. You are not conservative. All right? If you don't know economics, you can't do the math, shut up. I've had it.
Zennie, you fired up today.
No, it's just, it's just all this, it's just gotten to me.
You got it.
It really has. It's just I'm out here 3,000 miles from my dear mom here, and you encounter these folks here who are, they say they're conservative, and they have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's literally up the piece, wrote a piece, and her people, $42,000 median income, 85% white, 79% high school education, only 16% college, okay? They need money. The unemployment rate 16%, almost 20%. And she's rabble-rousing and bringing attention to herself, and no one is saying, excuse me, it's the same problem as in Oakland, right? The same thing. The extremes have taken over, and the business of government is not getting done, and people are suffering for it, and it ought to be criminal. It ought to be.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Someone's got to get.
Unfortunately, I have to run. But I say, unfortunately, I have to run. But if I can just offer this last point before I go, and it's two quick things. The first is, everything is about narratives. If we create narratives that excludes others, let's look at Trump supporters, for example. White people are also find themselves marginalized by economic order due to the mass outsourcing of manufacturing-based jobs that gave their parents and grandparents, etc., a leg up. We have to do a better job of, once again, I want to go back to the theme of unifying factors. If we create simplistic narratives, for example, we say, everything in America is anti-Black racism, then what does that mean for non-Black folks? We got to have deeper, real conversation. Second thing I want to say is this. It relates to the sideshow real quick, because I know the one thing I hear about sideshows in terms of people concerned is the violence. So I just want to quickly remind people that the act of drive-by shooting started with people like Al Capone and bootleggers. That same phenomenon of cars speeding away from law enforcement with illegal hooch in their car led to the formation of NASCAR. So it's so important, as you shared, Zennie, that we have to educate ourselves on the history and not get caught up in these false, simplistic narratives. Acts of violence at a sideshow in Oakland, all that should be criminalized to go to jail. No, let us reward the artistic behavior. Create safe circumstances and conditions so that way we can eliminate those elements of it, because it's not just a matter of saying people are just acting a fool. So that being said, I appreciate you. I gotta go anytime, Derrick. And thank you, Derrick. And Zennie, tell your followers.
Yeah, deputize him.
Yeah, please. I want this out there. People be asking me, hey, John, when you're running for office, you should run for mayor. No, Derrick is doing that. So y'all heard that. He's already has his hat in the ring. That's not what I want to do. I got other things I want to do. So please support this man, this brother, my friend, Derrick.
Absolutely. Definitely. Hey, Derrick.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, God bless. We'll have you back. Derrick, stick around for a sec, because we'll close out praising John.
Right.
Man, we definitely. How's the campaign coming along? What's happening, man? And let's shout out to John. How did you get to know John, by the way?
John, I follow John because he's an East Oakland resident. He brings up the topic of folks from incarceration, and that's a very important topic, and a topic that affects homeless and housed people. So it's something that we have to touch on. And right now, there are no safeties for the folks coming out of incarceration. And so we need to build in housing and shelter for these people. Otherwise, what ends up happening is they come out and end up here in the homeless camp. And it's not always a positive situation. If they're trying to leave a certain lifestyle, homelessness makes it impossible. And so it's extremely important, regardless of what they've done, to find housing that works for them and is a positive experience rather than the negative experiences that they currently experience, which is, released from incarceration right here into the homeless camps.
How, to what degree are the homeless populations growing? And I asked that because I happened to find, and I put on Oakland News Now, this kind of video. Well, I'll describe it because I can't seem to pull it up right now because the system is not. A fellow did a video that showed that via his dash cam, areas he had filmed last year are actually double in the number of homeless people. These are under freeway overpasses in Oakland, various streets. How bad is the situation collectively?
Collectively, just in my area, my zone that I walk and work, I've seen nearly a doubling. We went from a population that's in this area of about 200 people. We're seeing nearly 650 now, tucked in a lot of different pockets. And that's just in my area. And some of these pockets are the criminal elements, the gangs that have congregated in their own zone. I know of at least two close by near Denny's, and they're very dangerous. And they don't use guns, but they use machetes and hurt people that way. Crime is up, and the population of the unhoused is growing. Like I said, it's nearly doubled in the last year. Actually, since July, I've in my walks. And these are folks that are newly homeless because we know that there are illegal evictions going on in Oakland. And there are people, the folks that we're seeing are those that are undocumented or have some serious issues with the law. And so they're getting evicted. They're ending up here unhoused on the streets. Some of them are trying to be really good about things, and those are the ones that I really support, and we try and help them out the best we possibly can. But then there are those that cause nothing but harm. Right now, we had a situation last night where one of my residents down the street is in a battle with an outsider and nearly lost his shelter to a fire last night. And a person just came in, threw a firebomb in there, and took off. And so we were able to have enough fire extinguishing equipment where we were able to save a good portion of his place, but he still did lose a lot. But these are the type of violent things that are happening on the street that never get reported or talked about. And until we get people into affordable housing that doesn't exist in Oakland currently, this is going to continue to escalate. And then when the eviction moratoriums go off, I dread to see what happens.
Yeah, something I've noticed. I remember talking with a friend of mine who said that he has a place on Lake that originally went for $3,000 a month, but he couldn't unload it, rent it. He dropped it then to $1,850. He still can't rent it, so now he's looking at dropping it to around $1,500. Because I told him prior to him doing that, I said, "You're not going to unload that for more than $1,500 a month rent. You'd be lucky." So finally he adjusted, and I finally started. I searched around last week to determine how many units in Oakland could be had for less than $1,500 a month in rent. And on Zillow, I came up with 125. But get this, Derrick, when I started looking at it, like for example, there's the Nook on Valdez, which is a piece that I vlogged about. That actually has more than the number that you would think because of the address. The address on Valdez actually revealed 20 units. Of those 20, 10 were rented, 10 still available. So there were 125 that came up in the search on apartments.com. When you started looking at it, it was actually more than that, more like 300. And so what I'm getting at is I believe there are many more affordable units around Oakland, but they sit empty because the landlords are waiting for that time when the market rebounds and they think they can get their money, or you get the idea, okay? The bottom line is that they're empty, and I think what needs to be done for the situation is, and this is where it's not that I disagree. This is where I thought Moms for Housing was the wrong idea. And because there's nothing against anybody politically, it's just that I believe that what we had in redevelopment, we had a different market, right? And when Jerry got rid of it, the market changed. So now we have people reacting within that market rather than going back and changing the market so that affordable housing gets built. What I mean by that is that we had such a gigantic affordable housing fund that we could fund developers, and organizations like Bridge Housing and John Stewart became famous developers known for the expertise of building affordable housing, right? Because they had that fund to draw from, and that had been decades in existence by the time Jerry got rid of it. We had built up a great infrastructure of people, and I call it the affordable housing industrial complex. That's what we had.
Yeah, and that's something that I would be absolutely looking to restore, bring back to Oakland, because the current system isn't working, and it's doing more harm than it is any good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and we have to, at some point, we have to devise a way and then implement that way now. And here's the catch: is we can do it right now. It's not, but it takes the council on to unlock the market change that we need to do, and then say to landlords, "Hey, look, if you have empty units, we'll compensate you at a piece, but you gotta unload them. You have to unload them people who need them, and you can't just hold on to them like you're doing it because it's causing us problems." I think that's
pretty interesting that I've been speaking to a lot of landlords, and the thing that keeps coming up are rent controls, and a lot of the folks that are under the old Costa-Hawkins ruling, I could see why they're holding on, because as long as they hold them empty, when the market turns around, exactly what you talked about happens. They can raise it to that market, so it's better that it stays empty and they make nothing, because they'll make back their money plus a profit in a short amount of time when the market turns, if it turns. And that's very troublesome, because
Yeah.
those along with the empty new buildings and apartments, condos that are currently sitting all over Oakland, we're seeing upwards of 16,000 empty housing units that could be filled.
Yeah.
And they're not.
No, and we can unlock them. And not only that, under a normal market condition, all right, it's okay for them to wait. But the pandemic has produced a situation that is abnormal. And not only that, a lot of marketing for real estate, it was done and is done without regard to the fact that an investor in real estate today can be in Bangladesh or Russia. And so the person who holds on to has the leasehold in Oakland has even less incentive to want to rent it, because they can count on somebody buying it off them and then also wanting to maintain it with a same hold mentality, but they have no true love for the community or concern about its problems. And so what we have to do is fashion a law to quite literally break that, because what's going on is it's actually become the gantry for the rocket of increase in homeless numbers in Oakland. I think the best way to break it is to, first of all, you have to have a monetary incentive. You can't do it in a way that would imply taking without just compensation, right? Legally.
Right.
Right. So we have to, what it boils down to, and that's why I really advocate redevelopment, so that we can actually develop that fund. And let me do this. We can come back and talk about this one. This is
that's a big topic.
Yeah.
I've got some real ideas on how to reduce those development costs for the developers here in Oakland, so that it's going to lower the cost for the potential future tenants and buyers of those homes and condominiums, apartments. But it has to be, there has to be a start. If that's what I'm bringing with my PATH program to Oakland. I've been talking about it for some time. A lot of people are skeptical of it, but I have a lot of support with my program, and it's a non-competitive alternative to what we're currently facing in the real estate market. So this protects residents, and it also provides sanctuary housing for the much needed school teachers that need to stay in our cities and be able to afford to live here. And I want to encourage that. And also, we need to have our new medical personnel, rather than living an hour to 2 hours away from their assigned hospitals, to be living close by to those hospitals, especially for needs like what we're currently going through. So these are changes that I'm talking about with Oakland, and a lot of folks are getting excited about it because it is a change, and it's equal. It's equally applied across the board. We have sanctuary housing and heritage housing. Heritage housing, that addresses for former Oakland residents that can prove that they were harmed or that they were victimized by predatory lending and repossession of their homes. This allows them access back into living in Oakland at a very reasonable rate.
Derrick?
Yep.
Write it up. We'll put it out there. Thanks for coming. And John Jones, thank you so much. And everybody, thanks for watching.
It's been a pleasure talking with you and my buddy John.
Always a pleasure, my friend. All right, that ends this broadcast, folks. We'll be in the backstage. Thank you for tuning in to Zennie62.